if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box. I'm sure Dee Dee will go over that. But today's webinar will be about getting started with Ancestry.com. And just to remind everybody that the library does have access to free access to Ancestry.com on any of our public computers at any of our branches in the county. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the buildings right now, but once we do open back up, which should hopefully be soon, I just wanted to remind everybody that you are welcome to go ahead and utilize those resources at the library. So let me first introduce our presenter today. Dee Dee Baldwin has worked at Mississippi State University Library since 2007, first in manuscripts and now as the history research librarian and liaison to the Honors College. Genealogy has been her hobby for about 20 years. So Dee Dee, please feel free to take it away.
All righty, thanks, Mona. As Mona said, feel free to ask a question at any time. Don't worry about interrupting me. Just hop on in. You can unmute your mic to ask a question, or you can ask it in the chat box, whichever way you're more comfortable doing that. I do have the chat open, and so I'll be able to see your question while I'm talking if you do ask that way. Okay, so we are going to start off on Ancestry.com, and y'all should be seeing my browser window right now. Somebody let me know if you're not. So we're going to start off on Ancestry.com, and the first thing I'm going to show you is how to make a free account without having to enter your credit card information. They do have this thing at the top that says free trial, but if you do it that way, they ask for your credit card. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but some people just, for whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable entering that information online. So I'm going to show you kind of a backdoor way to create a free account without having to do that credit card information. If you already have an Ancestry account, you can go ahead and log in, and we'll catch up with you in a second. So to create this free account, we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen, and you're going to see this link at the bottom that says Support Center. So we're going to click this link that says Support Center. And once the search box comes up, we're going to do a search for free account. And it's usually one of the first few results. Right now it's the first result. So we're going to click this link here that says creating a free Ancestry account. And the very last step is right by this number 1 here. It says click here. So you click here. It's kind of a backdoor roundabout way, but they do that because they want people to sign up with their credit cards and have an account with them and everything. But you can work around that. So if you don't have an account yet, you can fill out this quick little form, and that will create your account. And while y'all are doing that, if anybody is signing up this way, I'm going to come back over to the site and sign in with my little demo account. And once you've created your account, or you have signed in if you already had an account, you'll be looking at a page that is pretty much like this. Does anybody need another minute to sign up for an account? If you do, just say something in the chat. Okay, so once you're on this page, you're ready to start your family tree. And once again, they have this link here that says build a family tree, start a free trial. If you do it that way, they're going to ask again for your credit card information, but you don't have to do that. You can just come up to the top and click this link that says trees. And when you click on trees, It's this very first option here that says start a new tree. So we're going to go there. And this is the screen they give you when you're very first starting off your tree. And of course, you're going to start off with yourself. So just click here and say add yourself and enter the information. Ancestry does use a standard date format. So if you start typing the date, say like this, you can see it's going to pop up with their standard format. You don't have to use their standard format. It just makes your tree look better if you do. One way you never want to enter dates, especially for genealogy sites, is to use this kind of format. And the reason is because a lot of countries around the world, especially England and Australia, they do their dates with the date first instead of the month first, like we do. And so if you type the date like this, Ancestry doesn't know if you're talking about the 3rd of April or the 4th of March. And the people looking at your tree don't know which one you meant either. So don't enter dates like this. So I do recommend just using the standard format. And then for locations, if you start typing a location, it'll give you a pop-up where you can choose the standard format for that. And for places in the US, it's the name of the town, and then it's the county or parish, then the state, and then USA. So click Save once you've entered your own information. And then you're going to need to enter at least one parent to start your tree. So I'm going to enter my dad. You can enter whichever one you want. If the parent is no longer living, you can uncheck this box, and then it's going to ask you for a death date. And then save. So once you've entered yourself and at least one parent, you officially have an ancestry tree. That's what they require you to enter to create a tree. And so once we've done this, I'm going to leave this tree builder part of the site because I don't like it, and it blocks out every other part of the site. So once you've entered yourself and at least one parent, we're going to come up to the address bar, and we're just going to go back to ancestry.com. And you can see that since I created my tree, it appears here now. They name it automatically with whatever your last name is. You can always go into the tree settings and change that name if you want to. You can also choose to set your tree to public or private. Some people, their first instinct is to set it to private, but I really don't recommend doing that, because if you have a public tree, then other people can see your information and get help from you. And they can also see if maybe you have relatives in common, and they can help you in return. And information about people who are still living is still hidden, even if it is a public tree. So privacy is still protected for people who are still alive. So I recommend keeping your tree public, but again, you can go in and change that to private if you prefer. So once you have your tree, you can come up to the top again and click on Trees, and now your tree will appear here. You can also go to Create and Manage Trees. That's where you go to change whatever tree settings you want to change. You can invite people to your tree if you want them to be able to look at it or work on it with you. And you can also add more than one tree. I have a ton of different trees on my account because I've made trees for friends and things like that. So you can have more than one tree. So we're going to go to the one we just made. So in my case, I'm going to click on Baldwin Family Tree. And this takes you to the standard family tree view. So you might be seeing hints pop up in the top right corner by a person's name. I usually am at this time, but Ancestry seems to be going slow for some reason. If you're not seeing hints, that's okay. If you are, that's cool too. So you can click on a person's name in the tree. So I'm going to click on my dad here. And it gives you this little box where you can go to Quick Edit, and that's if you just need to change something really quick, like the name suggests. You can also click on this little tool icon, and there's other options like adding relatives and things like that. The place we're going to go to right now is we're going to click on this button here that says profile. So anytime you click on somebody's name in the tree, you can go to their profile, and that takes you to the person's information page. You can add their parents from here. You can also add other relatives from the tree view, but you can also add them from this view as well. It shows the basic facts over here. If you have hints, you're going to see them pop up right here on the hints tab. If you upload pictures to your tree, you can do that by clicking on the gallery. So one thing I'm going to show you real quick is how to add multiple parents. That's a question that I get a lot from people who want to know how to add adopted parents versus biological parents and that kind of thing. So if you come up here to the top right and click on Edit, we're going to go to Edit Relationships. And I'm going to click Add Father, just to use as an example. I'm going to add a new person. And save. So once you have a parent listed, you're going to get this little drop-down box where you can choose their relationship to the person. So biological is the default, but you can change it to adopted, step, foster, any one of quite a few options. And you can also add an alternate father. So you can list his biological father, and then you can also add their adopted father or their stepfather, or however you want to do that. So you can add multiple parents. You can also add multiple spouses, any of that. So I'm going to close this out, and I wish the hints would pop up. Sometimes Ancestry is slower than other times. Let me see if I have a hint for my grandfather yet. I do not. I'm going to add a couple more people to the tree really quick to see if that helps the hints pop up. Does anybody have a question so far about any of this? Need me to show anything again? Again, if anything like that comes up, let me know in the chat or unmute your mic and let me know. So I'm going to click on hints, even though they have not popped up yet. And this is where your hints will appear. One common hint that you're going to get a lot is one that says, I think it says Ancestry member trees or Ancestry family trees, something like that. You can only view those if you have a subscription. But if you do happen to get a subscription and you're thinking about using one of those hints, just be very careful with those because they're inaccurate about half the time at least. They have tons of errors in them. So always take Ancestry member trees. That just means trees created by other people on the site. Just take those with a grain of salt. You can take them as hints, and if records then pop up to support that, then it might be right. But if you add a hint and you're not getting any records popping up to support it, then it's probably wrong. And I really wish these hints would pop up so I could show you how to attach a record, but it is not. This happened the last time I taught this workshop too. The hints were slow. Usually they just pop right up. That's a good question, Judy, about married name versus maiden names. Always use maiden names. When you're listing women in your tree, always use their maiden name. Married names are just assumed by whoever is listed as their spouse. Come on, hints. It's just giving me a hard time today. Okay, since our hints are not popping up today, I'm gonna go to a record really quick just so I can show y'all how to attach a hint. I'm gonna go really fast right now, so don't try to follow along. This is just to show you how to attach a record, since we're not getting our hints that pop up. Usually when I do this workshop, this is the hint that pops up for my dad. Okay, so just pretend this popped up as a hint. And when you have a hint, there's going to be a button by it that says review. And if you're seeing hints for stuff you put in your tree, that's great. It's going to have a green review button. And when you click that, it takes you to this page, and it has a thing at the top that says, do you want to attach this to your tree? And you would click yes. In this case, I'm going to save to someone in my tree. And once you choose to attach a record to someone in your tree, you're going to get a screen that looks like this. So the information from the record is on the left side, and the information that's already in your tree is on the right side. You can use these check boxes to transfer information into your tree. You can see when I check it, it changes what was in my tree to what's in the record. You can check it and uncheck it and switch it back and forth. And so my grandfather is also listed on this record. A lot of times you will have records that list multiple people, especially on the census where a whole family is listed. And so you can attach the record to a whole bunch of people at once. So in this case, I'm also going to be able to attach this record to my grandfather. And I'm going to use these check boxes to transfer the information. And then I'm going to click Save to your tree. So now his hints appear. Thanks a lot, Ancestry. Thanks a lot, Ancestry. So let's go ahead and go to this page now that it's here. This is what I was talking about with Ancestry member trees. Again, you have to have a subscription to look at these. But if you do get a subscription, like I said, take those with a grain of salt. You might see images pop up from other people's trees. These are popping up from my real family tree. I'm just going to ignore all those for now. This is an example of a record that you don't have access to without a subscription. You can see that it's blocking almost all of the information that would be in the record. None of these are records we can use. So once you've gone through your hints and attached the ones you can look at and ignored others if they don't apply to the person, you can come back to this tab that says Facts. And once you've attached a record, you can see that this Find a Grave record that I attached to my dad now appears under Sources. And you can come back at any time and click View, and it'll show you the information that that record contains. If it's a record that had an original image, that will also appear, so you can go back and look at the original image if you want to at any time. This is a really nice feature that lets you attach sources to people, because if you can't attach a source, you would have to keep track of them in some other way. Write them down in some file on your computer or maybe in a notebook, because it's really important to keep track of where you find your information. A lot of people, when they first start genealogy, myself included, I didn't keep track of where I found anything. And then later I'd be trying to figure out, where did I get this? And I had no clue. So it's really nice to be able to attach sources. You can't attach sources that you don't have access to without a subscription. So if there's a free record set, you can attach them, but if it's a record set that requires a subscription, you can't. If you do Ancestry's free trial, and I can't remember if it lasts a week or a couple of weeks or a month, I can't. They keep changing it, but however long it lasts, whatever you attach to a person or to your tree during a free trial, it will stay there even if you cancel that subscription. So I do get that question a lot. What happens if I attach stuff to my tree, but then I don't keep my subscription? You won't lose it. It'll stay there. So it's really worth it to go ahead and do that free trial and enter your credit card and everything, and attach as much as you possibly can, and then just cancel it before they charge you for a subscription. So just attach whatever you can in that period of time, and it'll stay on your tree. If you look at records using the library's subscription, so if you go in the library and use their free account, You can still get the information from the records, you just won't be able to attach them to your tree the way you can here. Like I said, you'll have to keep track of them in some other way. So these are the basics of like starting a tree, entering people, navigating these pages, attaching sources. Does anybody have a question about this part of it before we move on to looking at the records themselves and talking about how to search records? Does anybody have a question about navigating the family tree part of it? Okay, well, if you think of one, just holler. So now we're going to talk about the types of records you're going to be using the most often and the best ways to search those records. So we're going to come up to this top menu again, and we're going to click where it says search. And when you click on search, you get this quick little short menu, which I don't find very helpful. But if you click on search twice, it takes you to this really nice search page. And if you're using Ancestry at the library, the search page is going to look almost exactly like this. The map looks a little bit different, like it's blue, and it has a couple of differences. But like on the right side, the list of records that you're going to be using, this is pretty much all the same. So whatever I'm showing you here, you're going to be able to also use when the library opens back up and you search for records at the library, if you do it that way. Okay, so one of the first types of records you'll be using a lot, especially starting with yourself and recent people like your parents, your grandparents, depending on your age, might be your great grandparents, you're going to get a lot of hints for the Social Security Death Index. And to get to that, we are going to come over to this right side and we're going to click on birth, marriage, and death. These are called vital records. So anytime you see a genealogy site referring to vital records, it's talking about birth, marriage, and death. So we're going to click this link. And the Social Security Death Index is going to be the first one listed under featured data collections on the right side because it is, like I said, one of the most commonly used. You might have even gotten hints for some of the people that you've already put in your tree. You probably have already gotten hints for the Social Security Death Index. This is a record set that does require a subscription to use, but there's another site where you can use it for free, and I'm going to be showing you that later on in the workshop, that site. So for now, let's just talk about the basics of using the Social Security Death Index. You can enter a name. So I'm just going to enter a common name. I'm just going to put John Smith. And let's say you're looking for your grandfather. You don't really know when he was born, but you think he was born in the 30s. So you could put 1935. And when you enter a date, you get this little drop-down box, and you can make it be an exact date, or you can set a date range. So if you're not really sure when he was born, you could say plus or minus 5 years, and that way this search will look for people who were born between 1930 and 1940. If you really have no idea, you can use plus or minus 10. There have been times that I wish they had an even bigger date range than that if I really have no idea. So let's just do that. And let's find all John Smiths born between 1930 and 1940. And there's going to be a ton of them, obviously. But this is just to show you what the search results look like. If you have a subscription or if you're using the library's account, you're going to be able to see this information listed here. Instead of it just has date and then it has a blank date and month, it just has the year. You're going to be able to see that full information. But this is what the search results look like. One thing to note about the Social Security Death Index is this place where it has last residence. A lot of people use that as their place of death. And even Ancestry, if you attach a Social Security Death Index record to somebody, Ancestry will put this last residence in as their place of death. And that's not really accurate. This just means this is the last place where their check was sent, their Social Security check. It doesn't really mean that's where they died. A lot of people die traveling, or they die in a hospital that's not in their town. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why you didn't necessarily die at home. So don't use the last residence as the place of death. So if you have a subscription or you're on the library account, you can view the record and then you can attach it to somebody in your tree. Click back. You'll be using the Social Security Death Index a lot. And this is the place for recent people where you get vital information like birth date and death date. So we're going to come up to the top again and double click search to take us back to this search page. Another type of record that you're going to be using constantly if you do genealogy is the census, obviously. So come over to the right, and again, in this list on the side, you're going to see census and voter lists, and right under that, you're going to have the U.S. Federal Census Collection. So we're going to click that. And you're going to come up with this form at the top, and some people just start searching with this form. I don't recommend doing that because it searches every census from 1790 to 1940, and you're going to get a ton of results that you cannot use, and you're just going to have to wade through them and slog through, especially if you're looking for somebody with a really common name. What you need to do when you're searching the census is more of a targeted search. So you can scroll down and you're going to see this list of censuses where you can search a census for just that year. So go ahead and figure out what censuses you can search for a certain person in your tree. If you have an ancestor who was born in 1856, then the very first census you can search for them on would be 1860. And then you can keep searching every census year after that to try to find them. A lot of times Ancestry will help you out with hints, and that'll save you some time. So you don't have to actually go to each of these censuses and look for people. Ancestry will find them for you. But when they don't, sometimes you have to come here and look for them on your own. So a few important things to point out about some of the census years. 1850 is a big one because this is the first census year that you have every member of a household listed. Before 1850, all you would have was the head of household, who was usually the man, and then everybody else in the house would just be a tick mark. So you would have males age 5 to 10, females age 35 to 40, and they would just be tick marks. So if you have ancestors who married before 1850, you will not find them on the census with their family, and it's very frustrating, but that's just how it is. So 1850 is the first census where you're going to be able to find every member of the family listed. So that's a big one. 1870 is the first year where you're going to be able to find most African Americans because this is the first census that was taken after emancipation. Before this census, only free people of color would have been listed on the census. So if you had ancestors who were free before the Civil War, you might find them on the census, but the vast majority you will not be able to find until 1870. Again, very, very frustrating. Some people think that the names of enslaved ancestors might be on these slave schedules. Unfortunately, they're not. The only names on the slave schedules are the names of the quote, quote, masters, and then the people that he had enslaved on his plantation would have just been tick marks. So that they will have genders and ages, but they won't have their names. The 1890 census is almost completely lost. There's a few names left on it, but hardly any. I've never found any of my ancestors on the 1890 census because hardly any of it's left. It was burned in some courthouse fire or an archives fire, I'm not sure, but it burned. So we have this big 20-year gap between 1880 and 1900. Again, very frustrating. We lose a lot of people in this 20-year gap, especially if they were married or if they were born after 1880 and married before 1900. You're not going to find them with their parents unless they happen to be living with their parents and their husband or wife, which did happen a lot, so you never know. But we do have that big 20-year gap. The most recent census we have is 1940. The 1950 census comes out in a year or two. I'm not sure the exact year it comes out, but it comes out very soon. But currently, the most recent is 1940. And you can see with these little green buttons, Ancestry does give you free access to the 1880 census and the 1940 census. The site that I'm going to show you later gives you free access to all the censuses. But if you're on Ancestry and you want to be able to attach records to your tree, the only census you'll be able to use are 1940 and 1880. So let's go to 1880, since that's a free one. And when you search the census, and really when you search almost any other type of record on Ancestry, you never want to put too much information. Some people see these forms that ask for all this, and I've seen people go through and try to add all of this information, and they don't get any results, because if you put too much information, you're not going to get any results. So a simple search will usually do the trick. And by a simple search, I mean a first and last name, a year of birth or an estimated year of birth, and where you think they lived. And we can set ranges on this. So let's look at it. Let's say we're looking for a John Smith again. And let's say you think he was born around 1850. Again, we're going to get this little thing where we can set a date range. And on the census, you always set a date range on birth year, unless you're looking for a really common name. Like if you're really looking for someone named John Smith, you might want to make it exact to this year or plus or minus 1 year at most. But in general, searching the census, always set a date range of at least 2 years. I always use plus or minus 5 years, unless I'm just getting so many results I can't go through them. And we'll talk about the reason for the age range in a second. And then enter where you think they lived. So if I think this John Smith lived in Columbus, I would start typing Columbus-Lowndes. And again, when you start typing a location, it's going to suggest a standard format, so you pick that. And when you enter a place, just like with the dates, you get a little box where you can set a range on it. So if you think he lived in Columbus, but there's a chance he might have maybe been over in Oktibbeha a little bit, or maybe in Noxubee a little bit, you can say search the whole county. So if he wasn't exactly in Columbus city limits, you can say the county and adjacent counties. If you really have no idea, you can say state, and you can even go as far as state and adjacent states and country. And for a name like John Smith, I don't recommend searching an entire state or country. But sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you have to. So let's just say county and adjacent counties, just in case he's living near Columbus, but not exactly in Columbus. And that's really all you need for a simple search. So we're going to click search. And here are our results. So we have 22 results, again, because this is a very common name, and some of these aren't even John. You can see we have a Winnie and an Eliza. It kind of goes way off the beaten path after a while. It's going to show who they were living with. It's going to show a parent or a spouse. It's going to show where they were living in 1880. It's going to show their estimated birth date. It's going to show where they said they were born, which is not always accurate. And it's going to show their relation to the head of the house. So in this case, he is the head of the house. All right. So let's talk about birth dates and why you always set a range and why you always take these birth dates with a grain of salt. They didn't come up and ask, what year were you born? They asked, how old are you? And whoever answered the door would give that information about everyone in the house. So depending on what month the census was taken in, it might just be like a year off. So if the person was born in November and the census was usually taken in the spring, then that birth year might be a year off. So you get that's the most common, just being like a year off. But sometimes these people had no idea when they were born, especially in rural areas with low literacy rates where things weren't written down. Also, formerly enslaved people a lot of times had no idea how old they were because their births weren't recorded. Sometimes people estimated, so if a guy was 38, he might say he was 40 just to make things simpler. Sometimes the person who answered the door didn't really know or care, so if maybe a servant answered the door and just started listing the ages of the kids and they were kind of estimated, oh, there's a 10-year-old, there's a 5-year-old, So they can be off for that reason. Sometimes people straight up lied, especially women. I have an ancestor who was 30 on more than one census. Usually it's not that drastic. Usually they just say they're like 5 years younger, something like that. Sometimes if you had couples with a big age disparity, the older one might say they're a little bit younger, and the younger one might say they're a little bit older, so that big gap in their ages wouldn't be as pronounced. So there were all kinds of reasons that people lied on the census. So they lied, they didn't know, they estimated, all of these reasons. The birth date on the census can be very, very off. So if it looks like your person and everything else matches, you recognize the other members of the family, they're living in the right place, it's probably them, even if the date range is off some or even a lot. So let's click on, let's say that this John Smith in Lowndes County is the one we're looking for. And he's actually living alone. If there's other members of the household, they will also be listed here. And so it'll show you their basic information, how old they said they were, and then it'll estimate the birth year based on how old they said they were. Again, it shows where they lived. It says their race and gender, what their occupation was. Not all censuses have occupation, but 1880 did. So this man was a field hand in Lowndes County. And if you click on the original image, you always want to do this on the census, and one of the reasons is that some censuses, they don't transcribe all of the information, and so there's usually more information on the actual record than there is that was typed up and pulled out of the record. The 1880 census, almost everything has been transcribed, but not all censuses are like that. There's one census, I can't remember the year, but there's one census where they didn't transcribe occupation. So you have to actually go into the record and drag it all the way over to the right to see what the person's job was. So another reason you want to look at the original record is because you really want to look at who your ancestors' neighbors were. Ancestry highlights the name that you're looking at, and then so you can see who their neighbors were, and people were listed in the order of their houses. So this person would have, this David, I can't tell what that is, Crusoe? Yeah, it looks like David Crusoe. They lived right next door. There's an Evans, a William Evans, there's a Reese Berry. People often lived near their family. And so a lot of times, if you look at the original record, you'll see on that same page other people with the same last name. And if you're having trouble finding who a person's family was, sometimes looking at the census can be a really good hint because they're living by their family. This record is also a really good example of something else I want to talk about, which is name spellings. A lot of times on the census, they are very off. Sometimes that's because the census taker didn't hear the name right. Sometimes they did hear the name right, but they spelled it wrong. And sometimes, like on this record, it's very faded and the handwriting might be unclear, especially like look at these. Some of these names are very, very faded. And so whoever was transcribing this record might have had trouble reading the handwriting or reading a faded record. And so the name might have been wrong for that reason. So sometimes you have to be really creative and lenient with name spellings as well. And yet another thing to sometimes take with a grain of salt on the census is the race box. And this is because the census taker usually didn't ask, what race are you? They would just look at the person and decide for themselves. So you'll have some records where people are just listed as M. I don't see anybody on this record. It looks like all black and white. You can see that B and W, that's the race column. And I've had people in workshops in the past, they see an M or an MU in that column, and they automatically think that one of that person's parents was white, and that is not an accurate assumption. Sometimes the census taker would be like, oh, that person has light skin, that's a mulatto. And they might have had a white ancestor several generations back or one generation back, and there's just no way to know. So don't take things like mulatto under race, don't take that literally. Okay, so we're going to go back, and that's how you look at a census record. Now, talk about a common name. We're looking, let's say we really were looking for a John Smith. One thing that can help you in your searches, and you have to be creative sometimes, is if you happen to know that John Smith had an immediate family member with a less common name, you can look for that person instead. And this is one of the reasons I always tell people to go ahead and take the time to add extended family. Go ahead and add those siblings and aunts and uncles. When I first started genealogy, and I think when most people start, they just want to see how far back they can go. And so they're just adding direct ancestors, parent, grandparent, great grandparent. And I was never taking the time to add all those, as I thought of it, people I didn't care about. But you do want to add those people. And being able to use them in searches is one of the best reasons. So if you're looking for a John Smith, but he had a sister named Victoria, or his wife was named Victoria, then you're going to have an easier time finding her than finding him. Another reason to add those extended family members is because a lot of times you will find people that you might be looking for are living with those people. It was very common for parents and grandparents to live with their kids and grandkids later in life. And so, if you know all of your ancestors' brothers and sisters, you can look for them on the census as well. And maybe you'll find your person's parents living with one of them. So, they can also just help you verify that you're looking at the right record. If you know who their siblings were, you have maybe several results in the same place that kind of all look the same age, you can look at the family members and say, okay, there's uncle whoever, there's aunt whoever, this is the right family. So they help you in your searches, they help you verify information, and they can help you find other ancestors who might be living with them. Um, Other ways you might have to get creative in searches, and I have done this before. If I was just having absolutely no luck with a name, I've gotten so desperate that I would just put an estimated age and a county, and I would just look for everybody that age in that county. Or sometimes I would just put a first name, because sometimes maybe the last name was misspelled. Or if they had a strange first name, maybe just search for everybody with that last name in the county. I have a lot of ancestors in Louisiana with French names, and the census takers did not know how to spell those names even close. And so most of them I can never find by their first names. And sometimes I can't find them by their last names either. So sometimes you have to try several different searches to try to locate somebody on the census. One other thing I should have showed you a second ago, but I wasn't thinking about it. So let's just go back to this John Smith search. If you call up a person, we'll just do this random guy in Ohio, Ancestry on the right side will give you a list of other people who match that person. So it'll suggest records. Not all of these people will be that same person, but it's kind of like hints, and it can save you a lot of time to look for them this way. Again, don't assume that just because they're suggested they're the same person. Sometimes they're not, but sometimes they are, and it can save you time. So make use of those suggested records. Okay. So I'm going to go back up to the top and I'm going to double click search. There's one more record set that I want to show you before we go and look at the other site that has the free records, and that is World War I draft cards. These will come up in your hints a lot because almost every man of a certain age has one. So we're going to scroll down, and again on the right side, we're going to click on military. And World War I draft cards and World War II draft cards will both be the first two results under featured data collections. The World War II cards are also cool, but not as many guys had them, and they're just not as cool as the World War I cards. So we're going to look at the World War I draft cards, and this is one of the collections that Ancestry is providing for free currently. It's not usually a free record set, but during this coronavirus quarantine, it is. It's also free on the other site that I'm going to show you in a minute. So the reason World War I draft cards are cool, let's just enter a common name, Robert Jones. So World War I draft cards, almost every guy who was born in the 1880s has one. A lot of times you'll get them in the late 1870s. You sometimes get some in the 1890s, but by and large, any guy born in the 1880s and early 1890s is going to have one. It gives their exact birth date, unlike the census that just said, how old are you? So you can get the guy's exact birth date. It'll give you his place of birth. And none of these have it for some reason, but a lot of times it'll have a town. It won't just have a state, it'll have a town. It also, for a lot of the guys, gives you his middle name. So we have a Robert Manley, Robert Alexander, Robert Hancock, and a lot of times World War I draft cards might be the only way you ever see what a guy's middle name was, so that can be cool. So let's click on one of these guys. Here's one from Mississippi, so I'm going to go with him, Robert Manley Jones. And he's currently living in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, but he was born in Mississippi. World War I draft cards are really where you need to go and look at the original record. You can see right here, all they've taken out of this record is name, race, marital status, birth date and birthplace, their address, and where they lived. That's it. But there's a lot more on the card. So click on the card. And one of the coolest things about World War I draft cards is you get to see the guy's original signature. So if you scroll down to the bottom here of the card, that's his actual signature, which is pretty cool. If the guy couldn't write, he would have just put an X. So sometimes you see an X there. This card does not have it, but about half of them do. They wouldn't just ask who is your nearest relative, they would ask for the person's name. So sometimes you'll have the name of a wife or a parent listed here under nearest relative. Another piece of information on the card that isn't pulled out is their occupation. So this guy is a farmer. It'll tell you what company he worked for. That's by whom employed. In this case, he's self-employed because he's a farmer. And it says he's employed in Omega Township. And it has other information on here as well. But the most important things are his signature, his occupation, and where he was employed, and sometimes the name of his nearest relative. You can also slide it over to the right, and this shows you the back of the card. It has sort of a rough physical description. So this guy was medium height, medium build. He had black eyes and black hair. And sometimes you'll see some disabilities listed here. So there's a lot more information on the World War I cards than is actually pulled out in the transcription here. So those are the main things I want to show you on Ancestry. One other thing just to point out, let me go back to the search page. You can use the search page and use the map and click on a location to see records for that specific location. Mississippi has very bad online records. In a lot of cases, they didn't even keep the records at all. And in some cases, we might have the records, but none of them are online. So Mississippi, almost the only vital records we have are like some marriage records. They're not even complete. If you're looking in a state like Texas, you're going to have birth records, death certificates, marriage records, divorce records even, and you'll be able to view like the original death certificates. They're going to have parents' names on it, including the mom's maiden name. So, you know, Texas is a really good state for records. Any of the original 13 colonies have really good vital records because they've been keeping records for hundreds of years before they started keeping records in Mississippi. So just be aware that if you're looking for vital records in Mississippi, you're going to have a hard time. One of the only ways to find exact birth and death dates for Mississippi people is if you happen to have a family Bible or a headstone. Sometimes church records if you're able to track those down, but mainly headstones are one of the few ways you can find people's dates in Mississippi. Sometimes you get lucky and you find a newspaper obituary. That can also help. So that's all we have for Ancestry. Those are the main record sets that you'll be using. So now I'm going to switch over to another site that has free records, and that is FamilySearch.org. I'm going to paste that into the chat in case you want to click it. So FamilySearch.org is a completely free site. You can make a family tree on here, and you can also search records. Their family tree is a little bit different from Ancestry's. Ancestry lets everybody make a family tree, and so if you have somebody born hundreds of years ago who has a ton of descendants, they're going to appear on tons of family trees, tons of different trees. FamilySearch, their goal is to have one family tree that everybody's on. And so it's kind of like a wiki tree. Anyone can go in and add or edit information. So when you start with yourself and your parents, they're probably not on the tree yet, but the further back you go, those people are probably already in the tree, and then you can just connect to what's already there. So up at the top, I'm going to click on Family Tree, and then I'm going to go to the first thing in the list, Tree, and it takes you to a family tree that looks a lot like Ancestry's. FamilySearch does have hints, just like Ancestry does. On Ancestry, you have the little green leaves. On FamilySearch, it's like a little blue box that appears right here in the upper right corner of the person's name. So you do have hints. They don't work as well as Ancestry's. They have a lot of trouble with women's maiden names versus married names, which is frustrating, but sometimes you have to do a little more work on FamilySearch, but they do have hints. And you can click, just like with Ancestry, you can click on a person's name. So I could click my dad here. And instead of on Ancestry, it says profile. On FamilySearch, it says person. So you click person, and this takes you to that person's information page. And again, you can attach sources just like you can on Ancestry. You can see these are the ones that I've attached to my dad. And you can list their kids and their parents just like with Ancestry. If you're worried about somebody changing your information, again, since anybody can add or edit information on this tree, there's a little thing over here on the right that says watch. Mine says unwatch because I'm already watching it, but it'll say watch. And if you click on it, it'll email you anytime somebody makes a change on that page. If you're worried about people messing with your stuff, I can tell you that I've been using FamilySearch for over 10 years, and I've never had anybody mess up my information. I guess it must happen every now and then, but I've never had it happen to me, and I've been on here for a long time. People just don't do that. They just don't go in and mess with people's information. So that's FamilySearch navigating their tree. You can also come up to the top, just like with Ancestry, it says search, and I'm going to choose the first option, search records. FamilySearch has several important record sets for free that you would have to pay for on Ancestry. The Social Security Death Index you can use for free on here. Every census from 1790 to 1940 is free on here. World War I and World War II draft cards are on here for free. This is taking a long time to load for some reason. There we go. So you can search records by location, just like with Ancestry. You can click on the map. You can also search by the collection title. So if you're wanting to use the Social Security Death Index, you could come here and just start typing it. And you can see it pops up, United States Social Security Death Index. For the census, you would start typing United States Census. It takes it a second to pop up. So you can start typing United States Census, and there it is. You can get them all for free. It also includes the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules. And FamilySearch, they don't have as many records as Ancestry has, but they do have some that Ancestry does not have. And there's two from Mississippi that I want to highlight. The first one is the enumeration of educable children. So if you start typing Mississippi, it'll pop right up, Mississippi enumeration of educable children. This record set, it doesn't have a lot of information. Pretty much all it gives you is the name of the kid, the name of one of the parents, the estimated age of the kid, and what year they're in school. So it doesn't give you a lot of information, But if you're having trouble figuring out where people lived or connecting parents and siblings, it can help you with stuff like that. And it's always good to have more sources than none. So that is a record set that FamilySearch has that Ancestry doesn't. The other one is several years ago, they came and scanned a bunch of stuff from our Department of Archives and History. So if you start typing Mississippi Archives, there it is. It's this record set, Mississippi State Archives, Various Records. This is another record set that Ancestry does not have. So you can use the search form to search for a specific name. And it's going, there it is. So you can search it, or you can also browse it. And it can be kind of cool to browse it. They have it organized by county. And so you could you could come here and click on Lowndes and see what they have for Lowndes County. And every county has different stuff. Most of them have these county tax rolls, military grave registrations, ex-slave narratives. Some of them have court records. Some of them have wills and probate records. So it can be really cool to come and look at these. And sometimes you'll find just random strange stuff that you wouldn't have thought to find. And they do have the original images of the items as well. And again, this is a record set that Ancestry doesn't have. So I do recommend having an account on both Ancestry and FamilySearch, even if you do subscribe to Ancestry, which I do. I actually use FamilySearch more than I use Ancestry for whatever reason. I have always found this site more useful. So I recommend taking the time to set up your family tree and search records on both of these sites. And that's about all I have, unless there are any questions. I do have a handout that I give when I do this workshop in person. If you would like a copy of that handout, it has a few other sites on it that I usually don't have time to get to. Some newspaper sites and some other sites where you can look for military records and other types of records. So if you email me, my email address is in the chat. If you email me, I will be glad to send you that handout. And other than that, that'll be it, if nobody has a question.
Well, thank you, Dee Dee. I really appreciate it. And, definitely email her if you have any questions. But otherwise, we're looking forward to opening the library back up. But we appreciate you, Dee Dee, for doing this in the meantime.
All right, well, thanks for coming.
All right, everybody stay safe out there.
You too.
Bye.